All right, my pleasure to welcome back to the show. He is our basketball analyst, the man in the middle. Big Ben Stout is here. Ben, how are you, buddy?
What's up, Jeff? How's it going, man? It's been a little while.
Yeah, it's been a little while, but always great to talk basketball. You and I do a lot of conversing in March Madness time.
Yeah, no doubt. It's that special time of year. March is rolling around. I'm pretty excited about it.
Yep, I am all ready. My 2 days are scheduled off next week for the first round action, so it'll be good times. And of course, we have the AAC men's basketball tournament taking place out in Fort Worth this week. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So we'll kind of run through the schedule here and just put some capsule thoughts together. Obviously, we'll go a little deeper on UCF because that's what we do as Knights.
No doubt.
Apologies to the rest of the audience, but that's just how it works. So things get underway on Thursday. Early afternoon tip between East Carolina and South Florida. I mean, this is certainly a toss-up game if there ever was one. I would think, South Florida being the higher seed by one is a little bit better program. East Carolina has had their struggles this year under a new coach.
Yeah, I think they have a little bit more continuity, and I think a little more firepower in USF. I actually got the chance to cover a USF game earlier this season as a color commentator for Flow Sports. I did a Thanksgiving tournament that they were a part of, the Sunshine Slam, and so I got to see them go up against I believe it was Georgia earlier in this season. They wound up winning that game, so it was an interesting matchup. I think that was like one of their first wins of the year, but they're I think that they have enough, especially with somebody who's the scoring capability of Tyler Harris. I mean, I think they have enough to kind of take out ECU. As you said, they've been struggling. Both teams have really been struggling a lot this year, but I think USF kind of puts it together just enough with somebody like Tyler Harris being able to fill it up like he can.
Then, of course, after that game will be the 10 seed SMU taking on number 7 UCF. UCF smoked them pretty bad the last time they played here in Orlando, not very long ago. So this could be another good opportunity for UCF to take a first round victory.
Yeah, I sure hope so. I mean, being the Knights that we are, I'm hoping that the good UCF shows up that night. It's been an interesting season. It started out really strong for UCF, and it looked like with a couple of early season victories that, especially the Oklahoma State win and all that, it just looked like it was going to really potentially be a special season with somebody like Taylor Hendricks here in this in our program. And it just it's been very, very up and down and inconsistent over the second half of the season. So if you're a UCF fan like we are, certainly you're hoping that the talent that UCF has this season will shine through and you'll see some of those things, the good things that you've seen throughout the year. Taylor Hendricks has been the one really, I'd say, consistent bright spot for UCF, and I imagine he'll be featured pretty well, and SMU will try its best to key in on him. We've got other scorers and other capable players, especially CJ Kelly, I think, has really shown that he's a great playmaker. Ithiel Horton has shown probably our best overall shooter on the team. Hoping that, if somebody like him gets hot, and then Taylor's kind of doing his thing, then absolutely I think UCF can pull ahead of them, and it'll be kind of a repeat of that kind of blowout win that we had against SMU earlier this season. But that being said, I mean, if we get a little inconsistency from somebody like Darius Johnson, or we get some uncharacteristic turnovers, or untimely turnovers, I should really say, then you just never know. And what I'm hoping for as a UCF fan is that this particular game, especially, is able to be put away early, off to a hot start, able to carry that through with some form of consistency in the second half. Because the way these close games have been for UCF this season, you don't want it to be a 1 or 2 point game down the stretch with any team, especially in the first round of the tournament, going up against you don't really want to battle against SMU because you've got a very tough opponent in Memphis after that. If you are fortunate enough to come away from a victory, but they've got firepower on the other end as well with guys like Phelps and some others. But I think UCF takes it.
Yeah, Phelps is kind of like their, he leads them in scoring, assists, and steals. So he's definitely a top flight player. Yeah, I knew where you were going with the close game scenario.
Yeah.
The single digit losses, you just think, boy, a few more baskets and the record could be totally different for
Yeah,
UCF.
it's wild. I mean, I think it's 11 single digit losses this year for UCF. So that's only twice that they've gotten blown out, I believe. It's somewhere around that crazy number, right?
Yeah, and
And I think maybe 6 or so by 3 or less points, which is even just wow.
and and two recently on last possession too. So
Yeah.
it's like those definitely hurt. The third game of the day on Thursday, we'll have the 11 seed Tulsa taking on the 6 seed Wichita State. Tulsa has just not been a good team at all this season.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think this game might be a pretty much foregone conclusion for the Shockers.
Yeah, I think this is the one. This was, and that's what, as again, just I don't want to go back to UCF too much, but it's like that was honestly the last few games of the season that's what hurt. That Temple loss hurt so badly because we really wanted the 7 seed, or excuse me, the 6 seed in order to get this matchup with Tulsa. And then the next round of that, which we'll talk about, would be the matchup with Tulane, and that would be an easier road. And so that's what Wichita got. They earned it. They were able to even up their conference slate in being 9-9 in conference, and UCF wasn't able to do that. And as you mentioned, Jeff, I mean, it's just been a really kind of struggling rebuilding year for Tulsa. I mean, just kind of getting blown out multiple times throughout the season. It's one in what is it? It's they're 5-24 on the season, and I think a lot of those losses were basically been in blowout fashion. And so it's one of those things that that I don't expect really them to be any different against Wichita State. Wichita State is one of those teams that regardless of what their record shows, when they get in kind of those bigger moments in a tournament setting, it's just it kind of doesn't matter if the players that are on that team are part of those Wichita State teams in the past, and even the coaches. It just seems like that history kind of takes over, and that kind of consistency and grit kind of shows up from Wichita State. And so I expect no different in this game. This is probably, as you said, the one that is easiest to pick in the first round.
Yeah, and interesting enough, Jaquan Walton, scoring guard, Craig Bort Jr. I mean, he as a guard is leading the team in average rebounds per game at
Right.
6.3.
Right.
And they definitely look like a good team rebounding team, which is certainly a plus come tournament time, as we well have seen over the years. So in the So in the quarterfinals, Friday. So congratulations, East Carolina or South Florida. You get number 1 Houston.
Yeah.
There's the tournament. Thank you for coming and playing.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Appreciate y'all coming. We'll enjoy your flight home. Yeah, we spent a little bit of time talking about East Carolina and South Florida, but it kind of doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter who's in the 8-9 matchup. It's kind of it's kind of the funny thing about, if you were a 10 seed in SMU or even the 11 seed in Tulsa, it's like at least we avoid that side of the bracket, right? And because just Houston is just, I mean, they are what they have been over the last, I mean, I guess it's almost been a decade now, but certainly over the last 3-4 seasons of
Elite.
yeah, they're elite, but they also play like a team that doesn't know they're elite, if that makes any sense. In the sense,
Little chip on the shoulder, yeah.
yeah, they do. They just play like a team that is still trying to prove themselves, and in some senses they are. I mean, they've made those extra steps, to the Final Four, and they've made it to these big games, and I think they're still not. They probably don't feel, and Kelvin Sampson probably coaches them that way, that they still haven't gotten the national respect that they deserve. I mean, they've been number one in the net probably more weeks consistently in a row, I think, than any team in the country this season. And a lot of the talk over the last week is that they're probably not going to be the number one overall seed in the tournament. And so we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, with the guys that they have and the way that they play the game of basketball, just how tenacious they are, nobody stands a chance in that quarterfinals. I don't care if it's East Carolina, South Florida, or anybody. They're not losing that first game. That's for dang sure.
Yeah. The second game on Friday will have two teams that got a bye. Number 5 Temple, number 4 Cincinnati. Temple started off rough this season, but they certainly got it together. But they've now had a player lead the team. How much of an impact is that going to have? That's going to be interesting. But I like the way Temple has played. They're very tough. They're kind of like getting into a fight in a broom closet, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're a tough. I mean, they kind of exude that kind of Philly tough. And I'm sorry, Jeff, who was the player that left the team in Temple? I missed that one.
Yeah, I am looking that up because the name has escaped me because my show prep has it
wasn't Khalif Battle, was it? Because
it was Battle. I believe it was Battle.
It was Battle. Okay, yeah, and that's a player that last season, started off like first 3-4 games of the season. He had some crazy games, like 30-point games, 35-point games, and stuff like that. And he was just on fire. And then he had a season-ending injury. So they were really looking forward to getting him back. A lot of inconsistency at the beginning of the season, as you mentioned, with Temple. But overall, they are a really tough team. I like some of the guards that both teams have. Actually, we're sitting here calling Temple tough, which is certainly the truth. But Cincinnati definitely has the kind of background, and they've played that way where they're an extremely tough team as well. I like the combination that Cincinnati has of DeJulius at the point, somebody that reminds me a little bit of a kind of a poor man Kendricks Davis. He's like not the biggest of guys, but he he gets it done for his team. He kind of like makes the gritty plays. And then I really like the big man that they have in Cincinnati. I think he's a game changer, and I think he's going to be the difference in this game against Temple in Lotkin. Big 7-footer that moves really well. He made a difference against UCF in both games that we played against Cincinnati this season. So certainly I think he's going to be the difference maker in this game. He was injured a couple of weeks ago, but he's back from that injury now. I think he's extremely athletic and, somebody that really makes a big difference in the middle. And I think he'll be the difference in this game. And I think Cincinnati gets it done. I would, you would expect the 4-5 matchup to be a pretty tight one, and I wouldn't expect anything different in this. I expect it to be a pretty physical game, but I think Cincinnati is able to get it done down the stretch.
Yeah, and then of course the SMU UCF winner gets number 2 Memphis. You mentioned Kendrick Davis, who's certainly been, if not the top player in the league, one of them for sure.
Mm-hmm.
He's a spectacular player. And one thing that that somebody pointed out to me, he has really mastered throwing his head back as he's going to the basket to maybe influence that he was fouled.
Yeah, he's a special player. I mean, what can I say? I mean, he definitely gets to the line a lot. He the first matchup, the double overtime matchup with UCF, he I think he shot like something like 20 21 free throws or something in that game. He had 40 points in that game, so it makes sense, but um, he's one of those guys. He's not very tall. I think he's 6 feet, maybe. I mean, maybe 6 feet. I think that might be generous, but really athletic, really quick. He's just I mean, the SMU transfer. He's just a guy that is going to be the leader when he steps on the court. He kind of like a I don't think it's even fair to call him like an Allen Iverson type because he does get his teammates involved, but he's certainly a leader and one that is going to not only be deadly from behind the arc if you kind of give him a little bit of a window, but what he wants to do is kind of use his quickness, get into the paint, and either create for his teammates or take it up himself and draw a foul, and he's gonna knock down free throws. He's an 85% free throw shooter. I think him, you know, he went off again. So if it is the UCF, if it is the UCF Memphis matchup, I think we're in for a spectacular game. The
They
game's
match up
not,
well together.
yeah, it's if um the game's not in Memphis, right? The conference tournament is not in Memphis, right? Because
Correct.
if it
It is.
was, I know it's in
Yeah.
Dallas Fort Worth. I'm just saying,
If it was in FedEx Forum, it would be a
right?
long. It would probably be a long night for
Yeah,
UCF.
it just seems like playing Memphis there is a nightmare. I think the only time that I could ever remember UCF winning there in a setting like this was when Memphis was having a really down year, and I was living in Memphis at the time. I think it was like 2016 or 2017. But anyways, I really expect this to if it is if it's SMU Memphis. I think Tigers winning a blowout. And the reason why I think that is because Kendrick Davis is, I mean, he's not going to back down from anybody, but going against his old team in the conference tournament in a building that at a building that he's or a city that he's very very much familiar with.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he's not going like he's going to go off and go crazy. And again, when it comes to the UCF Memphis matchup, I think it's going to be a great one. If I'm hoping that's the matchup, obviously as a UCF fan. Um, and the first game that UCF Memphis played, that was the double overtime thriller that honestly probably the best overall win that UCF got all season. You could argue Oklahoma State in the early season, but certainly the best win of the second half of the season, or best win in the conference by a mile.
Well, I'll tell you about that game. What impressed me the most,
Mm-hmm.
and I happened to be at that game, and what impressed me the most was you lose, your best player to fouls. They're basically shorthanded at this point
Yes,
because they have five guys playing the last minutes of the game and all of overtime. They don't have a point guard because
right.
Jalen Young had fouled out
Mm-hmm.
and Darius was still injured. So he couldn't put any bigs in because they were already compromised with handling the ball. So
Right.
that was to me, one of the most amazing performances I've ever seen, period.
Yeah, it's probably probably the best. It's certainly the best win of the season. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, definitely a shining point of the last few seasons to be able to just grit that game out, right? And that's why I think that in the rubber match, I mean okay, so the second matchup between UCF and Memphis, they just jump out on UCF like that. Kendrick Davis is looking like he's just picking up where he left off when he was in Orlando, right? Like I mean, he was just going off, and then he gets hurt like 10 minutes into the first half, and things kind of start to change, and UCF goes on this huge run to end the first half, and it's back and forth the entire second half, and UCF finds itself down, goes on another big run to close it out, and then just I mean we've invented some interesting ways UCF has in figuring out ways to lose very close games this year, and to have the ball up by up by one with 7 or 8 seconds left, and all you have to do is just kind of dribble out the clock, I guess, because for some reason Memphis wasn't fouling, and we have our best ball handler, just unfortunately just kind of dribble into a trap and lost the ball, and they won by a layup, right? And even then we had a chance to lay it up again at the buzzer, and it wasn't meant to be. So it's just a wild game. Both games between these two teams have been fantastic this season, and obviously as a UCF fan, I'm hoping for the rubber match. I think it's going to be really difficult for UCF to pull it out against Memphis, just because we're certainly talented enough to beat them, but I think they've consistently kind of well, I should say they brought a little bit more consistency than we have this season. They're a little more battle tested coming off that huge game. They lost it, but I mean, they're more recently battle tested, I would say. And I think Memphis, if I'm really giving my heart of hearts, I hope it doesn't happen, but I think Memphis probably pulls out another thriller. And the matchup to watch in that game, I think, will be Taylor Hendricks against DeAndre Williams. I mean, I think that'll be a really interesting matchup to watch.
Yeah, I'd say what has impressed me about Penny Hardaway, because obviously he came in as the super recruiter. We're going to get these great one and dones that are going to go to the NBA, and now he's gone all veteran.
Right.
He's got Frank
Talk
Haith
about
on
an
his coaching
adjustment.
staff,
Yeah.
to kind of help him out. So I think it's I think it's really cool that to see him evolve as a coach.
Yeah, and he actually has done a pretty good job of taking some veteran guys on after his first season. He had Mike Miller on his bench. He kind of had a little bit more of an inexperienced bench his first season. Second season, maybe third season, he got Larry Brown on his bench, and I think that helped him mature as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly brought plenty of maturity to the bench, with considering how advanced in age Larry Brown is. But that being said, I mean, I think that did help him mature, and with Frank Haith, being fired from Tulsa, right? He was Tulsa's head coach. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that it was a good opportunity for him to scoop him up and get that presence on the bench. And I think he's done a good job of kind of realizing where his strong suits are as a coach and as a recruiter. Certainly that's one of them. I think his ability to relate with players, especially in the Mid-South area. Just having lived in Memphis, I kind of understand the mentality and the how much of a legend he is there.
Yep.
But I think that he's been humble enough to understand that he needs to kind of take that next step as a coach.
Yeah. And of course, we've already advanced Wichita State into the next round. Well, they will face number 3 Tulane on Friday. Tulane, not just a football school.
Yeah.
Basketball as well. And I've been a big Ron Hunter fan for a number of years. IUPUI, Georgia State,
right?
That remarkable NCAA tournament. So I knew when he got they got the Tulane job that he would do things there, and he has.
Yeah, and I got to the first game I was ever invited to be to do color commentary on ESPN Plus with UCF game was UCF Tulane, and so it was 2 seasons ago, and so I got to in the pregame prep, you get to interview the coaches, and so I got to meet Ron Hunter, and back then it was over Zoom, so I got to talk with him for a little bit, me and Austin Lyon, and really charismatic guy. Just you could tell he just how much he knows his basketball, knows his team, and knows what makes them tick. And he's got some dudes on his team. I
Mhm.
mean, Tulane with Jalen Cook and Cross in the middle. You got Forbes as well. I mean, he's got some guys that can really, really put it together. I like how active it's Kevin Cross, right? I think it's Kevin
Yes. Mhm.
Cross. Yeah,
Yep.
I like how active he is on the glass. Just really makes a point to go after the ball on every possession. He's a big time hustler, super athletic. But when you got three guys, I mean, averaging over, Kevin Cross averages 14 and a half points and 6 rebounds a game. So he's almost there at 15 points a game. And then you got Jalen Forbes and Javen Cook, like they're right there at 18, 19 points a game, 20 points a game. I mean, these are three guys that can really make them move. And so while we were talking about Wichita State just being kind of too much and too tough for a team like Tulsa that really has been struggling this season, I think Tulane overall is just ready to take that next step and advance to that, semifinal round or quarterfinal round of the conference tournament and try to make some noise. I think they've been set up for that all season. They've shown it this year. They've shown it in spurts, but they definitely have shown it. And the one time that we played Tulane at Tulane, unfortunately for us, was right after we played Memphis, right? In the
Yep. That
double
was.
overtime
Yep.
game, right?
Yep.
So if UCF is able to get past Memphis, guaranteed that's going to be a tough game, and we'd have to match up with Tulane again. So it'd be like deja vu, and they just kind of wiped us in that game. But not to focus on UCF Tulane too much, but that was a game that Tulane shot lights out in the first half, and UCF couldn't hit anything. It was like they didn't know how to see the rim in the gym, right?
Mhm.
And maybe that's an advantage of that kind of smaller, more intimate gym that Tulane has, arena that they have, um, for them as far as the sight lines go. But I don't think that goes away when you got guys like Cook and Forbes that can just really fill it up. I think they're going to be too tough for Wichita State, and that makes for a great matchup in the semifinals there. If whether regardless of who they play.
Yeah. Well, basically, on the analysis thus far, we pretty much have
We've gone chalk,
proclaimed
haven't
chalk.
we?
Yes, we
Yeah,
have.
yeah, we have gone chalk. Now, unless I kind of left the Memphis UCF game open a little bit, but I did say I guess if I had to bet on it, I guess I would go chalk.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to get too many surprises on the rest of the way, though. To be honest with you, it's these teams are tough, but
with Temple, Cincinnati being somewhat considered a toss
right,
up, that
yeah,
would be the only kind of fly in the ointment, if you will. But
right,
but if you look at a Memphis Tulane matchup in the semifinal, yeah, it's not a foregone conclusion that Memphis is moving on because
yes, yes.
that could be a very epic battle.
Absolutely. And I haven't looked back to see when those two teams played each other or how they played. I didn't get the chance to catch that game at all, but and I'll try to look back on it now, but they beat Memphis at home 96-89 earlier in the season, and then they and then it was at Memphis. They won by 1. Tulane did. So Tulane has beat Memphis twice this season. Um, while it's and the last one being on the road by 1. Um, eh, and I don't know the health of either team during those two matchups, but you got to think with both teams, I believe, relatively healthy going into this tournament. If that is the matchup that they have, it's going to be probably a spectacular game. I think probably that UCF that, so obviously the 4-5 we just talked about, the UCF Memphis is probably going to be a great game. I honestly think Tulane can probably handle Wichita State pretty easily. Um, so that may not be as challenging as we would expect. But so those are some great games in the quarterfinals there. But then getting to the semis, whether it's UCF Tulane, but really if it's Memphis Tulane, wow, that could be a knockdown, drag out, really kind of thriller of a game. So I have a hard time saying that Tulane's going to be able to beat them 3 times in a row if that is the matchup. And maybe it's just, thinking that Houston Memphis would be a showdown in the championship game. Not to jump ahead too much there, but I'd say that of the ones that would probably be the seeds to make the final from that bracket, I think that would be the most surprising. Probably would be, I think Tulane coming out of it wouldn't be a surprise to me at all. Like, and actually, I'm just looking at the game that they played with Memphis at Memphis, and that was actually an overtime game.
Yes.
Yeah, 1-point win in overtime. So that's so you got guys like Cook had 25, Kevin Cross had 22, Jalen Forbes had 18 in that game. So there you go. And then the stars were out. 26 for Kendrick Davis on the other side. Kennedy was 16, and 19 for Williams on the Memphis side. So each of these teams, both of those teams have at least three guys, especially when you're talking about Memphis, that can fill it up at any time.
Yeah. And of course, with Houston in the semifinal, so it could be Cincinnati, could be Temple. They swept Cincinnati. Temple actually beat them, so they were one of the few that took the Cougs down during the season as they split their series. I got a feeling if it's Temple, that Houston will extract revenge in a big way for that. If it's Cincinnati, I still see the Cougars rolling in that as well.
And that was a and because Houston blew them out, Temple did. They blew out Temple earlier in the season, and then that crazy game later on that was just a crazy win. But yeah, I think Temple or Cincinnati against Houston, they're gonna have to try their best to keep it low scoring. They're going to have to try to grind it out against them. Both Temple and Cincinnati don't mind playing that style of basketball. So especially if you're Cincinnati, right? Like you've got some size in order to try to slow the game down a little bit. But similar to what we were talking about with Wichita State, with their team rebounding, and I know since we just expect to, Houston to be here at this point, we haven't touched on it too much, but just Houston. I mean, there's no better team rebounding team in the country, I don't think, than Houston. They don't ever really have these huge guys that are over 7 feet tall and just monsters or whatever, but they always lead the conference, lead the, top 20 in the country. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but they're always such a good rebounding team, especially on the offensive boards, right? They're going to get their second chance opportunities and all that. And so if you're either of those teams, Temple and Cincinnati, and Temple, I believe he's still healthy. They got a player that used to play for UCF and a big man, so they've got some size in the middle, but just how relentless Houston is, and how many, how balanced they can be on offense. You've got Sasser for sure, but he's going to kind of get his, but you never know what Tremont Mark, a guy like Tremont Mark, who is kind of a do everything guy for them. Like he could have 20 on a given night.
Absolutely.
And obviously they've got a one and done in Walker as well, that I think is a really good player also. I mean, they've just got too many weapons that it's hard to say that either Cincinnati or Temple would be able to beat them in this setting. It's one thing to get those guys kind of in a a weird low scoring game like Temple got them, in the 50s.
Hmm.
It's one thing to do that, and I'm pretty sure Temple like went on a big run in that game to even be able to do that. But it's a whole nother thing when you're talking about in this environment when Houston's not like one of those teams that you know all the elite teams in the country, they want to win their conference tournament, yes, but if they drop it, it is what it is, right? They won the regular season. If you win the regular season in the Big 12, it kind of, I mean, you win the conference tournament, that's great. That's icing, but that's icing on the cake. The regular season matters a lot more to the title. Regular season matters
Hmm.
much more to them. But Houston's not that type of team. They don't take any nights off. Um, and so I expect that one to be another handled game. I doubt it would be a close one, but hey, Temple is a team that has taken them, and Cincinnati's one of those teams that, with some of the size they have down low, has some potential to kind of slow it down and keep it close, maybe. But I see Houston pulling away from either team.
All right, so we could be looking at a potential Houston Memphis final, a potential Houston Tulane final. We'll
Right.
hold on the Memphis one first because we kind of already know what we get when those two teams play. But
Yeah.
we'll get back to that in a second. But Tulane and their matchups with Houston this year, they lost by 20 at home in January, and then Houston blew them out even bigger by 30 points at home in February, just merely a couple of weeks ago. Um, this would be interesting to see how the third time around would play out. Again, as we talked about, Tulane certainly would have the firepower to be competitive, but they haven't been competitive in their two prior matchups.
No, they haven't. I mean, we've been losing by 30 points, right? Like, it's just at their place is a tough one to call. And I'm sure it being in, I'm sure for both these teams, but I mean, I say that about Tulane, but I don't know how big their basketball following is. I mean, they've had a good year, but I don't know how many of their fans are from their they have a smaller student body overall. I don't know how many of their fans are really traveling towards Fort Worth this week to if they were to make the final.
If they got all the football fans that went to Dallas, then
Yeah,
you might have
you're
something.
right about that. You're right about that. But I think we're talking about something different here in this matchup. Hey, if they were able to make the final on Sunday, I guess you never know. And certain, but you would obviously expect um, it to be a pretty heavy matchup or heavy crowd for Houston. So they would have that momentum behind them, and the same momentum that they had at home that led to a 30-point victory. One that they just like kind of did what they do in the first half on some teams, and they just jump out on them, right? And so it would be a tough matchup. I don't care if it's Memphis or Tulane; it's just a tough matchup with Houston. But certainly, like we talked about, I mean, not to continue to hedge my bets here, but when you've got three guys, when you've got three options that offensively can do some things for you, I think that you potentially have a chance. Um, but the problem with going up against Houston, if you're Tulane, is that it's going to be hard to keep them off the glass when you don't have the size. And Cross is tenacious. He's a guy that really gets after it, but he's kind of the main guy, right? That they rely on him for the second chance opportunities and the hustle points and all that. And when you've got eight deep coming at you, whether they can go eight deep on Houston, every single one of them is going to crash the boards and get that extra hustle point. It's gonna be hard to deal with that for 40 minutes, and that's the reason why Houston has the record that they do.
Yeah. Um, and I think the other thing that amazes me about Houston, because it's not just the work on the boards, the way they play defense. I mean, they're basically in your jock,
They
and
smother you.
they're so fast. It looks like there's six guys on defense.
Yeah, they have a way, and this happened in the second half in both UCF games, while they played them pretty tough. Um, it just they have a way of just kind of making your head spin on offense. They kind of speed you up, and they confuse you at the same time. They like force you to do things that are just they're just not ever what you practice, right? Like they force you into even unforced turnovers because you're just trying to move the ball so fast to try to avoid them coming into the passing lanes, and that's just the way it works out for you. It's just eventually it just isn't a good night for you.
Yeah, that's for sure. And of course, if it's a Houston Memphis matchup, we've seen them, battle mano a mano the last
Hmm.
couple, 3 seasons. And it's interesting, that last regular season game, what 2 years in a row now,
Right.
has been epic going into the tournament. So just 2 days ago, Houston, wins on the last possession. And Houston swept both meetings this season. Uh, if they play again come Sunday, I mean, I don't know how you cannot expect more of the same.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Jeff. I can't imagine this one, just like tournaments past, just like regular season past, this past season. I can't imagine this wouldn't be another kind of knockdown, drag out fight if it does come to the 1-2 matchup. Um, I just this one would be another special, kind of matchup that you know that I'm sure Memphis just feels like, with how they were able to kind of hold them in the second half of that game. Again, just like we talked about with the Tulane game where they blew out Houston, or Houston blew out Tulane, excuse me.
Mhm.
Um, Houston kind of jumped on them in the Memphis game as well, and they had a very strong first half. Kind of Memphis made some runs to kind of keep it a little bit close, but the second half, Memphis really locked them down on defense. And we just talked about how smothering Houston's defense can be at times when you got those athletes going on the Memphis side. And you saw this a lot in years past when they had some of that younger NBA type talent where they could kind of full court press you and kind of use their athleticism. But you have that this season as well. You've got some athletic defenders on the Memphis team, but you've got some veterans in there that kind of know how to use that savviness as well. They kind of are able to use that, just the experience and smart way of playing the games. And so that's what made for this a great matchup a few days ago. And certainly I think if it comes down to that 1-2 matchup, it could be another special one.
Yeah.
But if you're asking me to bet on it, Jeff, I can't. I have a hard time in this conference betting against Houston. I will say though, it'd be great if UCF was in that game. We get another crack at those guys, but
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. Who
Oh,
knows? We got
they,
that again. I'll say it again about UCF. They're the 7 seed. They've had very wild inconsistency over the second half of the season, but uh, pretty healthy team now at this point, I think. We've had some injuries that people don't even realize throughout the season. But we're talented enough to beat anybody in the
yeah.
conference. And that includes Houston. It's just we haven't been able to put it together for 40 minutes uh, um, since we put it together for 50 minutes against Memphis,
Yeah.
and we were
Yeah.
shorthanded then.
Yeah. Well,
But
in conference play, it's happened before. If people catch a little lightning in a bottle opportunity, you never know. So obviously, Houston is not on the bubble to get into the NCAA
no, they
tournament.
are not.
That's
No, they are not.
so Memphis or Tulane or any other team that wins the tournament would get in with an automatic bid.
Hmm.
So my question would be: so if Memphis does not win the conference tournament, have they done enough to get in? There's been quite a few. There's been a few bid stealers already in conference tournament play around the country, which may affect that bubble in a bigger way than originally anticipated.
Yeah. They're what are they sitting at in the net right now? I had it pulled up earlier. They're at 34 in the net. Um, they've got let's see here. They're 2-4 in quad one games, but probably more importantly than that, because the losses don't necessarily matter in the quad one games. As long as you can get those 2 wins, that's what matters. But they're 8-3 in quad two games, and I think that actually mirrors pretty closely to what they were at when they were on the bubble last year and they got in with a good conference tournament run. I don't know that exactly. I'd have to look that up, but that's not too far off in what what they were able to put together last year. And then certainly you look at the kind of last 4 teams in last season, that's real close to like somebody like Notre Dame, for instance, last year, which was probably the last team at large bid in the tournament. So I think that if Memphis makes the conference tournament final, that'll put them at 25 wins on the season. They'd be 25-9 if they lost the final. Within the Tulane matchup, I guess that would be another quad 2 win. I don't know if they count it that way in the conference tournaments, but that would probably put another notch on their resume in order to give them a nod. I think. I mean, especially if you're sitting at 34 going into it, but I think Memphis is the only team. I think they're the only team that has a chance as an at-large bid from the AAC this year. It's been a little bit of a down year from that standpoint. I mean, I've obviously we've talked about at length the lost opportunities for UCF this year, and they're the third highest net ranking in the conference right now at 72. So it's really Memphis and Houston that would be in the NCAA tournament unless there's a bid stealer situation that comes through. So, but looking at the quad one, quad two wins for Memphis with 10 quad one, quad two wins, that's 2 from quad one and 8 from 2. I think that should be enough for them to be pushed forward if they can make the conference final, the tournament final.
Yeah. Well, I think regardless of what we're looking at, a conference tournament, semifinals and finals look to be some real good basketball to watch.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Hey, just a couple quick notes. So the women's tournament is happening this week in Fort Worth. UCF leading by 4 over Cincinnati.
Awesome.
Late third quarter, 32-28. There's about 25 seconds left in the quarter. So if they could take out a 2 seed, the number 1 seed, South Florida, was upset by Wichita State today. So
wow, yeah. So who knows? Who knows?
Anything
that would be awesome. I mean, it's been a tough year for Satia Messer in her first season at UCF. A lot of injuries, a lot of turnover from last year's team, obviously with Coach Abe, leaving and taking the whole staff and team with her basically. But I think Satia Messer has done a good job of like kind of trying to set a little bit of a foundation, even though we've had some disappointing games there, disappointing losses throughout the year. Man, that's wild. I didn't even realize USF went down today. So that's quite the carpet that could be laid out here if we can take down Cincinnati.
Yep, and they've increased the lead to 6 at the end of the third. So go Knights, charge on.
That's right. Charge on. That's what I'm talking about.
That's good stuff. Well, Ben, as always, man, I certainly appreciate you being on the show as always. So let folks know where they can follow you on social media and whatnot to get more of your great insight.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at BigSocial32, and most of my social media channels are that as well. BigSocial32, and AP and I and Roger, we're still doing Knightline podcasts every once in a while, and so you guys can catch us on there as well.
Outstanding, Ben. Thanks again, and we'll be back right after this.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.
And one more button to hit to finish the recording, and